And the next presentation then moves to this different approach, the approach of food supplementation. And the example that we have here is going to be presented by Professor Patrick Sorgeloos from Ghent. It's a particularly interesting example because when we talk about factitious prey, those are prey that are not necessarily naturally encountered by these biocontrol agents. And this is definitely a case of a prey that is not naturally encountered. It's the brine shrimp that can be used for supporting biocontrol as well.
Thank you, Felix. Good morning. I'm maybe an outsider here in this group of specialists. I'm learning a lot. But we'll speak today particularly on the possibility and in fact the application of using Artemia as a food supplement. Technical description, well, what is this animal? Some of you might be familiar with, others not. It's a very peculiar extremophile living at very high salinities. So this is a unique example where, for example, the Great Salt Lake, 8,000 square kilometers where you have a monoculture of the brine shrimp Artemia, measuring about 1 centimeter in size. And the unique thing for aquaculture, as you will see in a moment, and particularly also in your application, is the fact that these animals, the mother Artemia, can reproduce by 2 ways. Either they can produce live offspring, and then you will see that that this loop will be closed, so the animals will produce the live nuclei over a period of a number of months, and you get a big increase in population. And under extreme conditions, which is either high salinity, low oxygen levels, we have that formation of an embryo, 4,000 cell gastrula stage, that stops further metabolic development, is surrounded by a cyst shell, and in fact is released in the environment. So it is there that back in the 1960s, the Japanese were the pioneers in finding out that the use of this magic powder, as I dare to call it, it looks like sand. You can store it for decades. You put it in seawater, and the next morning you have plankton, because this is in fact the way it is used as a substitute for plankton in the feeding of baby fish, baby shrimp. It all started back in the 1960s when just 2 companies in the United States were marketing these cysts for the aquarium hobbyist market, because there was no modern aquaculture yet with hatcheries. It was in 1976 that FAO for the first time called a technical conference on aquaculture, and where already in the opening address it was recognized that, yeah, is there a future with Artemia if we have to rely on import from the US to develop aquaculture for the poor people in Southeast Asia? This is not a very good objective. I had just finished my PhD, and it was like the world was falling apart, hearing that there is no future for Artemia. So I came up with a number of very theoretical assumptions. It's not when you do the work in test tubes in a laboratory that, lucky enough, when you are young, you are ambitious, and you dare to say things, which we can be lucky that indeed over a number of years, through a lot of concerted efforts, I must say we have, right from the beginning, invested in a multidisciplinary approach. A lot of papers, a lot of books, a lot of manuals were published. And in fact, we have seen that starting from the 1980s, the development and the availability of Artemia in aquaculture became a reality. And then, you see that it has been a spectacular development from less than a ton in the 70s to over 3,500 tons today. So this is where a number of specific applications apply for aquaculture, but in your case, it is mainly the decapsulated cysts. So once you have removed the shell, some of these insects, it was Professor Patrick de Klerk at our university back around the year 2000, if I remember well, that the first tests and the first results were obtained, and later on, then it was companies like Biocontrol who further developed the technique. I think, and later in the presentation, I will draw your attention to the umbrella stage, because I think that there are a lot of other opportunities to explore in the application of Artemia as a food for insect larvae. Where are these products coming from? And as you see, it is mainly fisheries, the Great Salt Lake. What you see in the picture here is just a harvest of maybe 10 to 20 tons of these cysts that accumulate at the end of the summer on the lake. So about half of the commercial quantity today comes from the Great Salt Lake, but there are a number of other places in Central Asia, in China, where the Artemia are coming from. What could be of interest for you is that we see a lot of new developments. A lot have to do with development cooperation. Countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, a number of others, where there are poor salt farmers, and where today they can integrate salt production plus Artemia production. And what is maybe of interest for you is that there we can manipulate, we can have some control over the production in terms of the strain, in terms of the nutritional conditions, and indeed produce a product of a much higher quality. Quality when it comes to size characteristics, I don't know if this is important, but particularly when it comes to nutritional lipid composition, carotenoid composition, etc. Thibaut, I have followed strictly the template that you have provided on the technical description of your method. So it is, as we have heard from Felix, two options in the use, either as a prey in the production of your predator insects, and as a potential supplement in the crop. So it is a typical application that was described earlier by Felix, and where it is mainly focusing on predatory mites and predatory bugs. Could be applied maybe for a number of other groups. I'm not a specialist in the field, you were the ones here in the room. Worldwide, indeed, because you have that availability of these Artemia cysts. Just a couple of slides. A lot of papers have been published in the meantime on the use of these decapsulated cysts, and where indeed I think more work is needed to look into these differences in quality of the cysts. I don't know to what extent the lipid composition, highly unsaturated fatty acids, we see that in crustaceans, aquatic crustaceans, might be similarities with the insects, that this can have a major impact. And there is a lot of variation there that could, in my opinion, be further explored. And then also when it comes to the palatability, certainly also an area where there is room for further selection and improvement. So it can either be sold as a single product, or it can be in a combination with the prey mites, so that you can see here in the pictures the decapsulated cysts on the leaves, so that it is then also available as an extra source, not only in the production of the larvae, but then later also in the application. So is the method available as a product? I think I have convinced you that seeing the developments in aquaculture, this is a product that is widely available, and on top of that certainly offers opportunities for further study and research to look into, in fact, better quality products in terms of nutritional composition. It is harvested from different lakes, but okay, that's a quality you cannot do much about. The big developments now are mainly the controlled production at cost competitive prices, because there you can really look into the quality of the product. And of course, in aquaculture, it is an established business, processed and commercialized by a number of companies. In the Americas, I see Brazil here, the Nordeste, there is quite some activity with Artemia. On all continents, there is such activity ongoing and increasing. So used by biocontrol industry for the production of generalist predators, as I have told you earlier, and then either as a food supplement or to boost the populations in cropping systems. What advantage do you claim for this method? Well, price-wise, I have seen figures that it is about 10 times cheaper applying this Artemia as compared to the eggs of the Hephaestia. It can be stored unfrozen, so that gives a lot of opportunities also when it comes to distribution. A long viability, decades, as we have tested. Different qualities, and I think there is a lot of room for further optimization. And limited risks of pest stimulation, because you are coming in with a complete different product. Who are the actors? Well, the Artemia producers, be it harvesting from the wild or controlled production. Motivation, well, there might be an opportunity to look into other applications. Particularly, I'm impressed also to hear how important that industry has become. So a method for the insect rearing, and also as a potential food supplement. And who are the actors? Well, the farmers, as they could improve the efficacy of their biocontrol. What forms of gains, direct and indirect, does your method generate? Well, more reliable and potentially cheaper as compared to the application with the Hephaestia eggs. Longer lasting food supplement when used in crops, because you can spray it on the plants, no need to freeze. A preventive use in conservation biocontrol will of course reduce the cost of the predator releases. A large range of qualities allows more targeted use, so this is where I think there is room for further study and improvement. So what could have been contextual factors? Well, the advantage there is that seeing the developments in aquaculture, there has been quite a history accomplished already, and the fact also that it is occurring on different continents. What were the turning points? Well, a turning point was certainly that decapsulation technique, because if you are applying the cysts with the shell, the insects do not manage to get through the chorion. This is a technique that we had developed for application in aquaculture, and it was Patrick de Klerk studying insect control at Ghent University, who worked with some of our students to develop that new technique. So I repeat, nutritional composition is very different from strain to strain, leading also to different applications in aquaculture, and I'm very much convinced also there are opportunities for you in that application. Manipulate even a nutritional composition. When you do controlled production, you could in fact provide, or you could modify the nutrition of these Artemia and increase carotenoid levels, change lipid composition, etc. So what are the major obstacles? Well, the natural resources. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was an important FAO subcommittee on aquaculture where the future of Artemia in terms of sustainable harvesting, that there should also be some kind of certification that Artemia products should have a QR code, that you can have a better way to know where the product is coming from and what the qualities are. So there you see already the MSC label has recently been accepted for product coming from the Great Salt Lake. So in terms of risks, it was good that Felix was drawing my attention to this. Even the decapsulated cysts of Artemia contain a chorion that contains chitin, and so in consuming the final product that might have been treated, that might have been covered with the Artemia, that could eventually be a problem. Thank you.
Very, very nicely within time, so that leaves us room for discussion. Any questions?
Thank you, Professor. It's quite new for me, this topic. I'm interested to know a little bit how to apply in the crop the cysts.
Yeah. Well, I think, Felix, you were the man to answer that question.
Yeah, I can say something how it's being used. The most common way of applying is actually spraying it onto the crop. And these decapsulated cysts, they will stick to the foliage where they fall. And the big advantage, as Professor Sorgeloos mentioned, is the fact that they actually will stay viable as a food source for several weeks, which is an improvement over some of the other food sources that we use.
Well, the price goes from $20 to $200 a kilo, depending on the quality. And the quality is, of course, hatchability. This is a very key factor, of course, in aquaculture. But for you, it would mainly be the nutritional composition. So one of the reasons in aquaculture that you have such a wide price range is that there are products that contain from 10 to 50 milligram per gram dry weight EPA. The eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, an important one in the nutrition of crustaceans. So I wouldn't be surprised that it is also an important one in insect feeding.
Okay, I think I have a silly question, but I ask. Is it salty and is it good for the predators? Or?
Well, a very good question, and we are very fortunate that although it is called the brine shrimp, that originally it comes from freshwater, hundreds of millions of years ago. And it is an animal that has gradually adjusted to higher salinities. So it has a unique osmoregulation system. So it means that it is an osmoregulator, not an osmoconformer, and it has a low salinity in the body fluids, similar to, in fact, the salinity of our own blood. So we are lucky.
Here, this is Simon again from INRA. My question is about at the end, like you just said that the eggs are sprayed over the crop. And I wonder, because this is not a liquid, it's like a grain of salt, it's pretty big, an egg. I wondered whether the normal equipment of the farmers is suitable for this spraying, or do they need to acquire specific equipment, and if that would be something that would be a problem?
Yes, it is indeed. You need a specific valve that you add to your sprayer, but it's a limited investment to the farmers, so they can use it. And another thing which also relates to the question of the cost, you mentioned the cost per kilo. You also have then to see how many kilos you use per hectare, and that can range, but we're talking about several kilos per hectare that are often used. And that's different between the different food supplements. So pollen, for instance, is used at 500 grams per hectare. So these brine shrimps are a bit more in terms of weight per hectare.
In fact, it's a dry powder.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. I think there is some confusion in spraying and blowing. So it's blowing with air. It's not mixed in water and then sprayed.
Well, it can be done both. You also have applications in water, which has the advantage that then the product is sticky and sticks to the crop. But you're right, it can also be applied as a dry blowing.